This is White Plains Week, the weekly news roundup. With your moderator, John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And Peter Katz, noted broadcaster and journalist. White Plains Week. What's happened? Who are the newsmakers? And what's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented Fridays at 7:30 and again on Mondays at 7 p.m. here on Channel 76. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains and Westchester, and welcome to White Plains Week, the City News Roundup show. And, of course, good evening to all you opter-outers out there. We know who you are, and we'll know that forever. John Bailey with you on White Plains Week with these anchor for all seasons, Peter Katz, and, of course, the man who's been with me from the beginning, 16 years ago of White Plains Week, Jim Benerofe. The man who needs no introduction. One of the two on the show. Of course, you all know me. I'm John Bailey. And right now, the headlines. Jim.
And here are the headlines for this week. Deadline for opting out of White Plains Sustainable Westchester Con Ed Solutions coming up next week. You have until approximately April 20th. If you're a small business electric user, you pay more under Sustainable Westchester terms. Single home sales prices rise in White Plains as home availability shortage creates bidding wars. Co-ops are now logical choice of first home buyers. 15% of White Plains 3rd to 8th graders opt out of New York State mathematics assessments. Majority whose parents opted them out are from middle school, and we're told White Plains Middle School's teachers encouraged them to opt out. School District and Centro Hispano hold a private gathering to encourage Latino parents to support dual language as the way to comply with state directive to serve English language learners. Visa MasterCard scam asks for your 3-digit security code, which appears on the back of your credit card. Playland Museum holds fundraiser, now charging $7 to see limited exhibits. The county legislature appears ready to spend $32 million of your money to make capital improvements, but balks at fixing colonnades. Standard Amusements is all right with that. The HMS Titanic struck an iceberg on the night of April 14th, 1912, and sank 104 years ago at 2:30 a.m. This day, April 15th, 1912, with a loss of over 1,500 lives, lost due to the liner not having enough lifeboats.
Right. And it's always been a disaster. It has fascinated everyone because it was a disaster in its own making.
Something fascinated me, which also happened yesterday, April 14th, 60 years ago in 1956, which is when the first commercially viable videotape machine was introduced at the National Association of Broadcasters convention in Chicago. It was made by Ampex. The networks went absolutely wild for this, and it changed everything about television, having the ability to record and play back on tape.
And what is the primary advantage of videotape, Peter? Instant replay, of course.
That's true. It brought instant replay to sports. It brought syndication into an easy reality with television. It allowed us to now look back at things that happened up to 60 years ago watch them very clearly as if it happened yesterday.
In incredible reality, much better than film.
And it allows everyone at home to record White Plains Week and watch it over and over and over again.
Right. Put together the White Plains Week Golden Anniversary massive set, which is available for an astronomical price. Right. Okay.
So what happened this week, John?
Well, what happened? Well, we all watched the debate, right? I only caught the last 10 minutes.
Yeah,
between
last
Hillary
night. We're
Clinton
recording
and,
the show on Friday.
Bernie Sanders.
Actually, as we speak, while we're recording it, Carole King, the world-famous songstress, is appearing here in White Plains.
Feeling the earth moving under her feet.
To help them establish the Hillary Clinton campaign office over on Martine Avenue. That's going on right now. Last night we had the Democratic debate, Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders. It was in Brooklyn, New York. She has her campaign headquarters in Brooklyn. He was born in Brooklyn. So,
Taking the turf back.
They all claimed a tie-in to Brooklyn. You remember in the old days you used to say the word Brooklyn, people would start applauding.
Right. Well,
cheering.
everybody was from Brooklyn in the movies.
Well, I thought it got a little bit contentious and crazy last night. They really seemed to take on one another, no?
Yeah, it did. I thought that there were lots of points, for instance, when they talked about health care, and Bernie Sanders brings up the fact that where he says that every other country in the world provides health care for almost the whole population.
As a right for the population.
Yeah. And first of all, he was talking about countries like France, England, I think Germany.
Much smaller than the U.S.
They are much smaller than the U.S. I mean, you want to compare health care, well, to the United States, compare it to China, Russia, India, in addition to which, he mentioned Canada also, which is a more normal comparison. But people from Canada come to the United States to get medical care because he doesn't point out that they have to line up there and
long waiting periods because the health care is somewhat rationed.
So I thought that was one thing, and they don't get into discussing these things in the kind of detail that they need to be discussed.
Well, what was interesting this morning, I got about a dozen emails from the Bernie Sanders campaign fact-checking some of the things that Hillary Clinton said last night. Now, she made a point last night of trying to point out where Bernie Sanders was saying things which are not quite true. So that, it started out as a kind of friendly, we're all in this together kind of campaign. If you look at the early debates, compare them with last night's debate, and you'll see a certain degree of hostility which has entered into this. As it stands right now, Hillary Clinton still holds about a 10-point lead in the New York primary, which comes up next Tuesday. What really is amazing, though, what has gotten to me about this, what's happening in New York State in the primaries over on the Republican side, where Donald Trump is holding something like a 60% margin on this, on Ted Cruz and John Kasich, his opponents there.
He's a New Yorker.
Is that it, or is there something else going on here? Is it just that New Yorkers cannot vote for Cruz?
Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have something in common. They both haven't released their income tax returns. And that was brought up and I cannot understand why Bernie Sanders has not released his tax returns. He says they're very boring, and he's probably the poorest guy in the Senate. So why is he holding back on this? I mean, his tax returns couldn't be very long if he's one of the poorest guys in the Senate.
Good question.
I cannot.
Actually, now on Trump, what he had said is that he's undergoing an IRS audit, and the Trump campaign, has actually put out a letter that the IRS sent which confirms that he is undergoing an IRS audit.
So,
Well,
who's made
so-
his
so
taxes
that-
I
already
can
raised?
tell you, I know from my own experience in being in the real estate business, Donald Trump's tax returns are large. And when I say large, I'm talking about over 100 pages a year. And he probably files taxes in more than one state and possibly even files tax returns in other countries.
I suppose you would have to if you have a presence there, which he does.
But Bernie Sanders, I mean, if his income tax is boring, what's he withholding it from?
Let's see how boring it is, Bernie.
Donald Trump, by the way, is campaigning this weekend. He's doing a stop in Syracuse, and then he actually is getting closer to our area. He's scheduled to do an appearance in Poughkeepsie. And as of now, nothing scheduled in Westchester.
Right. However, he was the subject of an intriguing lampoon last weekend. Why don't you show that?
Indeed, he was. This is something which is virtually new, unless you happen to be on the Harvard Lampoon. The Boston Globe, in its editorial section this past Sunday, did a mock front page as if Donald Trump is President of the United States. And the headline on the Boston Globe mock front page would be "Deportations to Begin," as you see there. And some of the other stories that the Boston Globe says they would be reporting in a Trump presidency are headlined, "U.S. Soldiers Refuse to Kill ISIS Families. New libel law targets, quote, absolute scum, unquote, in press.
That's us.
Markets sink as trade wars loom." So it was quite something to see the Boston Globe taking a leaf out of the book of the Harvard Lampoon and others and put out a mock front page to make a point. As you can imagine, in the editorial, they did not come out in favor of Donald Trump being elected president.
Well, certainly was quite a shock, and that a newspaper would do that in that way.
Well, apropos of that, am I correct? The New York Post?
New York Post has endorsed Trump. Yeah. The Daily News has endorsed Hillary Clinton. And I think we can guess. I think we can guess.
Kasich against rather than Trump. The Daily News.
Well, on the Democratic side, on the other side.
I just wanted to point out that you. Well, anyway, be that as it may.
Be that as it may.
Let's move to the shocker of the week. Last week, we told you all about the sustainable Westchester and Con Ed Solutions rates for consumers and how they're going to change.
Sustainable Westchester is a nonprofit, and many of the communities here in Westchester have joined with them to make all residents and small businesses in these communities customers of Sustainable Westchester for the supply of electricity.
Yeah, on the top of the slide, Peter, we have the rates that the consumer will pay on the top line, who chooses to stay with Sustained Westchester by not denying it.
You now buy your electricity from Consolidated Edison Company of New York, and you're paying about 8 cents a kilowatt hour if you're a resident, and about 9.5 cents if you're a small commercial customer.
Yes, but 8 cents for the green option and 7.68 cents.
No.
All right,
those are the Con
let me
Edison
explain
prices.
it because I know this. The thing here is that's the trailing price of Con Edison for the last 12 months, stopping in February. Right in the middle is the 7.68 cents rate you get if you take the energy supply option from Con Ed Solutions and the basic supply option, which is basically the dirty. Yes,
John,
it is.
Those are the numbers that you get if you take your supply from Sustainable Westchester.
Yes, which is Con Ed Solutions.
They're getting it from Con Ed Solutions,
That's
but
right.
you can also buy direct on your own from Con Ed Solutions without using Sustainable Westchester.
It's dead even on 7.38
Not for me.
cents.
On the rate,
your electric rate is different.
on my electric rate,
Yeah.
I'm saving, I would save
Right.
by staying with Con Edison. It's cheaper for me to stay with Con Edison than to go with Sustainable Westchester, and cheaper for me to stay with Con Edison than to buy it from Con Edison Solutions, called Con Ed Solutions, which
Right.
is
But
their
this
ESCO operation.
led you to explore what it was for Con Ed Solutions for the small business.
That's correct. If I were a small business here in White Plains and I were switched to Sustainable Westchester, right?
Right.
I would pay about 9 cents per kilowatt hour
Right. You had that
for
slide back,
my
I don't see it.
electricity. Okay? Now, if I were to go directly to Con Ed Solutions on my own and not be taking the Con Ed Solutions electricity through Sustainable Westchester, I would save myself about 22% by going
Right.
direct.
If we can
It
have
would
the
be
shocker
cheaper for
slide
me.
back, we'll see it again. There you go.
This was presented to us when the city opted into it as being a way to save money on the cost of electricity. Well, if you look very carefully, it may be a way to break even on the cost of electricity if you're a resident, or if you're a small business, it may be a way to pay more for your electricity.
Yes.
I'll tell you,
It's very complicated, by the way.
yes, I understand that it's very complicated, and I just don't know where they expect everybody to figure this stuff out. People just fall into it. They don't bother reading these things. You would have to
in
spend.
fact, you know, Jim, it's funny you mention that, because in the letter that they sent to the White Plains residents saying that you have time, 20 days, to opt out from this, they suggested that you just throw away the letter, that you do nothing and throw away this letter in the recycling bin.
Yeah.
You'll
That
see that.
is
You'll
that
see that.
letter.
in-
You know,
in the-
you
in the
get
box there.
letters. Then I got a call the other day on the phone, and they said, if you're eligible for a 14 or 20% reduction in your electric bill, and it's somebody, I think, advertising solar panels, and they tell you to press 1 and then go on. And we're getting calls at the rate of about between 3 and 5 calls a night that are dumb calls, if you will, where you don't know who's calling or why they're calling or where they're from or anything of the kind, or they're doing some kind of a survey. It's a nightmare, and it's time consuming.
Well, the way it's set up now is that you have a little time left to opt out of the switch
About
to
a week.
Sustainable Westchester if you so choose. You should have gotten a postcard with a letter explaining all of that. You can also go online. They give an online address in that letter where you can do an opt out
Or you
if you
can
want.
call Con Ed.
Or you could call Con Edison, and actually someone could probably explain all of the various pricing options
Yeah,
to you.
it reminds me, I went on my computer last night, and I had to get something that my wife sent me in an email, and unfortunately my computer said it was updating, so they said press the restart button. So it started, I went through the restart process, and it must have been 15 or 20 minutes before it was finished. And by that time, I had gone out of the room to do something else. And it's just one nightmare after another as far as these things are concerned.
Isn't technology wonderful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Think
in
of where
fact,
we'd be without it.
It's useless.
moving on to the good news. Moving on to the good news. We go to the housing front. Single home sales prices rose in White Plains from October, November, December during the first quarter of 2015. Now, what is interesting here, Jim, is the average selling price, even though the number of closings were down, the average selling price is $640,000 in White Plains compared to 619,000 just the last quarter. That's a small increase. And talking to Mike Wesley of Rand Realty, who supplied these charts, he points out that this is because of the small inventory of homes available for sale in White Plains.
Those numbers don't apply to my neighborhood. The house directly across from me just sold. I got a card in the mail from a real estate company telling me the house across the street from me just sold for $425,000, which happens to be less than we paid for our house 26 years ago.
On the other hand, that house is a lot smaller, though.
No, it's not smaller. Square footage is about the same.
But the property is nice, it's not as big.
Property is not as nice as ours, yeah, that's true. We have nicer land, but that's not...
well, it is, I can see where it would cause concern.
Causes a lot of concern, because that's the second house on our street to go for a really low price.
All right. Well, people still think the Saxon Woods Road is closed, you know? If it is open, ladies and gentlemen, so that should be publicized in a press release. Now, on another front of the home market is co-ops. They are really taking off in sales. They sold 69 in the last 3 months of 2015, and it held at about 62 the first quarter of this year. And however, the prices are holding steady and slightly up too. They're going for about 180 average selling price, and this is, I'm told, because these houses are the houses that people looking for a first house, a co-op, home ownership, can afford. And this is the hot market, whereas condominiums, next slide, not doing as well. Sales were off 43% from the last quarter of 2015 through the first quarter of this year. The average selling price sliding down to $421,000, and the median selling price also sliding down, off 25%, and we'll hopefully discuss that more next week. And moving on to the opt-out tests. We got these figures from the White Plains School District on Thursday, and in the mathematics assessment held this week, 15% opted out, 474, approximately 3,185, and 146, 9% of grades 3 to 5 opted out, but the big contributors to this opting out was in middle school, 6 to 8. 20% of them, 328, opted out, and we were told that teachers in middle school encouraged the children to opt out. They encouraged it. I cannot, that's a bad position for an educator to take.
Have we heard anything about the French
especially when they're talking about need to break up banks and stuff. Maybe we need to break up banks and things because nobody has the mathematical understanding to understand.
Have you heard anything about the French-American schools, as long as we're on education?
Gag
Has that
order.
been moving along?
Gag
no
order.
No one said anything.
No one's saying anything. However, we came up with some good uses of that property: a cemetery, a drive-in movie, a solar panel
solar panel field.
Right.
You could probably generate most of the electricity we'd need in White Plains.
Absolutely.
Oh, I know what we haven't mentioned. The school system has finally signed on. They signed their deal with Solar City to install
and they're starting
solar panels on the roofs of the school buildings, right?
The high school.
They've been starting installing them over at the high school.
Yeah.
There's a meeting coming up on Monday. We're recording this on Friday, this coming Monday. The people doing the survey, the study on the downtown White Plains Transit District, they're having another little meeting. It's at the New York Power Authority building, 121 Main Street. That's Monday, April 18th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. They want people to show up and so you can tell them
because
what
there's
you think.
no parking there. Because there's no parking there.
You know, it's really an inconvenient
It
spot
really is a
to
bad
be
spot for
holding this. And also, they're holding it opposite some other important meetings going on in town.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be another meeting for the public to talk about the dual language
Over at the schools.
over at the high school. And what happened on Wednesday evening was that there was a meeting for the Latino community at the Centro Hispano, a cooperative effort between the school district and Centro Hispano. They serve sandwiches, and at that, a number of Spanish teachers from the middle school encouraged in Spanish the Latino audience mostly to support dual language and how wonderful it was. And also was pointed out by the person who told me about this, who was there, that they have asked the school district for more information on how the straight bilingual classes in the elementary schools are doing vis-a-vis the dual language students in their performances, and that has not been forthcoming. If they're better, we need to know that. If they're worse, then that's good. However, we know from the slide we showed you last week, and we can see that slide about how the passing rates of dual language work. They're just about a wash between students in the whole school for GW and for George Washington and Post Road. And so where's the improvement here?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
This is a wash. So why is dual language so much better, other than it's a nice thing?
I don't know. Ramapo Town Supervisor Christopher St. Lawrence was in White Plains this week, actually in federal court, to plead not guilty. He has been indicted on criminal charges involved with the sale of $150 million in municipal bonds based in part on made-up town financial documents which were altered to make it possible to sell those bonds to help finance a minor league baseball stadium that they have in Ramapo. Now, this was after, in 2010, they had a referendum, and the townspeople voted not to float bonds to pay for this stadium.
Anyway.
But they did it anyway.
Right. And he is our indictee of the week. And, yes. Who will be indicted next week? Stay tuned.
I don't know. Oh, at Playland this week, you know, they're actually starting to do work over there to get it ready for the season opener.
We saw them raising a dock. This is a shot at what it looked like in February after the big windstorms, and they were raising the dock yesterday, plus doing some routine work.
And this is as the County Board of Legislators is moving a little bit closer to confirming this deal for Standard Amusements to join with the county in running the Playland Park.
So this whole project, which was supposed to save us all this Playland debt payments, is going to cost us more debt payments. Isn't that a wonderful thing?
And the Children's Museum over there has been raising money. They held a fundraiser this past week. To get their thing going. They have actually opened their doors. There were some children in there this week.
And we close with the shot of a very memorable, awful event. The Titanic sunk on April the 15th, 1912. John Bailey, Peter Katz, Jim Benerofe. Good night for White Plains Week.
White Plains Week has been a presentation of White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com, in cooperation with Channel 76. Comments may be emailed to WPCNR@AOL.com. The copyrighted print White Plains Cityscape by Leonard Weber is used courtesy of the White Plains Presbyterian Church. For information on its availability, you may contact the church at 761-8585. The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented Fridays at 7:30 and again on Mondays at 7 p.m. here on Channel 76. For White Plains Week, this is Seth Benerofe speaking.